Hey there, internets. Welcome back to From My Grandfather's Desk. If it's your first time here, hit the subscribe button. It is a pleasure to have you with me. If it's not your first time here and you haven't hit subscribe now. Because there is most definitely a anti-2A algorithm, and we're talking 2A tonight. So this is our Georgia Democrats coming for your guns, because they made it a little harder to research that. They're a little more circumspect on their websites, a little more careful about what they say, and it's not like Washington State where there's multiple gun ban bills and magazine ban bills filed every single year. Georgia's not quite that anti-gun as a state. So, first place I went was the Georgia Democratic Party platform website. Their website doesn't have their platform on it. Right? The Democratic Party website is where I went. Their website does not have the platform on it. I emailed them asking, because I said, I'm doing a YouTube channel. I'd like to have this information from the horse's mouth. And it wasn't just I want to say, oh, look what I got. If their platform doesn't have it, I can't criticize it. Usually you're proud of what your platform says. So if anybody out there has a 2020 or 2022 platform, the most recent one I could find online was 2011, and that's older than can legitimately be used for this purpose. Because people in the party change. So their website does criticize Governor Kemp for taking donations from Daniel's defense and for passing permitless carry. They call it criminal carry. People on the right call it constitutional carry. I'm just going to call it permitless carry, which is kind of neutral. And throughout this video series, I am using assault weapons in the colloquial sense, not the technical sense, because we know the technical sense for civilian ownership already is a pile of crap. It does not exist. High-capacity magazines, we're just going to use that colloquial term because there is no such thing. And when it comes to whether or not you need a concealed weapons permit, we're going to call it permitless carry, which is still accurate. They criticize him for going after other issues related to school shootings or mass shootings, but not for guns. Unless you don't see guns as a problem, why would you go after something that you don't see as the root of the problem? And the House Democratic Party's page says, we are still heartbroken from the grief of witnessing mass shooting after mass shooting in our country. We must put an end to this cycle of senseless gun violence, starting with the cracking down on gun trafficking, closing loopholes in the law to allow criminals to legally buy guns without a background check, and holding irresponsible gun dealers who sell them accountable. The last part of that's the one that isn't just a bunch of platitudes. And of course, the Democrats don't say, let's go after all the other issues regarding gun violence. They want to go after the gun industry. And that is a pile of crap. They're holding people responsible for something, not what they did, but what other people do with their product. So since I couldn't go through their platform, we got to look elsewhere, which allows me to go right into what I normally else. So the second part of how I look at this. What do their politicians say? And I think I got a good sampling. I didn't find every legislative candidate that's running for an open seat or running against a Republican. I didn't find every last person running for the U.S. House. But I got a good sampling here, I think. In searching for their party platform, you go back to what the politicians say. Of course, Biden won't shut up about guns, so I found a tweet that was from the 24th on last Saturday at about 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That said he was calling for an assault weapons ban, and earlier in the week, he said he wouldn't rest until they were banned. So again, Joe Biden, the leader of the national part of their party, as in the whole country's party, is again calling for weapon bans. He is not your friend. But I didn't just look at the governor's race or the Senate race. There are other races, most notably the legislature. Some of the people in the legislature, sorry, I said, like I'm kind of doing current legislators, any candidates I happen to stumble across, and go through their websites, Facebook posts, anywhere they talk to the media about it, to see where they stood. Some of those senators and representatives are running for higher office. The candidate for attorney general, for those of you in Georgia, she's a doozy. She is not your friend if you support self-defense, being able to defend yourself. So we're going to use 5 positions to determine whether it's anti-2A. That's going to allow for some nuance. I'm all for accountability. I'm not for weapon bans up to and including machine guns. I think they should be legal. But holding people accountable for at least making sure they're not knowingly selling a weapon to a criminal, I'm okay with that. So what we're going to use as our yardstick is, do they support gun bans, for assault weapons bans, high capacity magazine bans, want you to license your constitutional rights just to possess a weapon. If they want a license, they're not your friend. Do they want to repeal stand your ground laws or castle doctrine laws? Because usually when we're talking about the right to self-defense, you're talking about having to use lethal force. And that typically in modern day means a gun, not a sword. Most, if they even mentioned the issue, just talked about platitudes. Or said common sense gun laws, which you could argue is code for all of that. Or they're just talking, we need background checks and stuff we generally already have. So I'll allow for some nuance to some positions, but let's get into this. Starting with the top of the ticket, Stacey Abrams. Raphael Warnock, we're going to have to know the good reverend. As the Bible says, you will know them by their fruits, and we're going to know him by his fruits because we're going to have to wait. We're just going to have to wait until we get into the what do they do. Stacey Abrams, her website says she will repeal permitless carry, campus carry, and claims gun shows are unregulated because of the state of Georgia doesn't regulate them. Well, the feds do. All right, I went in 2004 even. I went to a gun show with money burning a hole in my pocket. Walked out with a semi-automatic rifle, little carbine, and I bought that. Had to still fill out a 4473. Still had to. They went and did all that background check stuff. But being a long gun, I could take it that day. I didn't buy a handgun because it had to be a waiting period. I didn't have my concealed weapons permit at the time. So, yes, they do regulate them. That is a pile of crap that they don't. So, in Axios, they asked her about how she previously had sponsored a ban, which we'll get into in the what do they do section. But she said that position is not tenable. So that means that if she could do it, she would, but she knows she wouldn't get elected. So and she certainly wouldn't keep office, so we're not going to push for it right now. But in 2018, she was still saying she supported assault weapons ban and bragged about her F rating from the NRA. Now, I'm not going to get down on people for, hey, so-and-so is endorsed by somebody. Well, Trump endorsed a Democrat in their primary in New York, and everyone accused that guy of suddenly being a Trump ally. And the guy was one of the people that tried to impeach Trump. So we know that that's not something you have any control over, someone saying, I endorsed this guy. Well, Richard Spencer endorsed Trump in 2016. Didn't mean Trump liked it. Richard Spencer turned around and endorsed Biden in 2020. The guy's still a racist that he was then. So we're not going to count somebody on their endorsements unless they own them, which we'll be doing here in a minute. And we're not going to say, oh, well, that's just their propaganda giving her an F rating. She's, okay with guns unless she owns it. The NRA, I may have my issues with some of their behaviors, mostly about not getting involved early enough, but when they give somebody an F rating, there's a reason. And if she's bragging about it, then that's like bragging about your endorsements. And in 2020, and on the Issues article, she said she voiced her support for gun bans. Link in the description below. Following 2022, legislators and legislative candidates are endorsed by Moms Demand Action and say so on their own website. So they're owning that endorsement. Rep. Jason Estevez, Rep. Willie Mae, and I'm going to butcher this, Oligoa. It's spelled Oygoa. I butchered her name. I apologize to her and her supporters. I'm doing the best I can on that one. Senator Sally Harrell and Senator Kim Jackson. They all own their endorsement. They have it on their website that they are endorsed by that person. They're not trying to hide it one bit. And of special mention when it comes to the Moms Demand Action endorsement, Senator Jen Jordan, who is also the Attorney General candidate for Georgia, I said she's a doozy. She's not only endorsed, but she tweeted out about Moms Demand Action making her a candidate of distinction. Conveniently, what did they do? We're going to find out that she's against stand your ground laws. So you have to ask, why would you want that woman as your Attorney General? This is like making New York's DA, who jailed a man for defending himself when he was attacked by this gal's boyfriend, and she's reaching in trying to stab him, and she wasn't even charged, and her boyfriend, when he died, they charged the guy that defended himself on video with murder. Okay, this is the guy. I have no doubt that she could easily get along with that DA. You have to ask if you really want a woman like that as your Attorney General. Quite frankly, it's insane. And then on websites of some others, we have about 4 here where on their websites they take anti-2A positions. Senator Patrick Thompson in the 56th District calls for assault weapon and magazine bans. Incumbent Mary Frances Williams opposes stand your ground laws. And I don't remember where she's the incumbent. I just noted she was an incumbent and forgot to write down the district. Angela Moore of the 90th District calls for magazine bans. And Mary Robichaud of the 48th District and caucus treasurer, so a member of their leadership, calls for a magazine ban. And then we're going to get to a site called votesmart.org. I didn't run everybody through it, but Senator Moracena Tate via votesmart.org she took their political courage test, which, at least she's willing to come out and say what she's about. It says, as it puts it on there, wants to ban all sale and transfer of all forms of semi-automatic weapons. That means my tube-fed .22 that was my grandpa's, she wants to ban it. Remington used to make a tube-fed or tubular magazine semi-automatic. It was the semi-automatic version of counterpart to the Remington 141 Model 14 and Model 141. Wants to ban those. They only have 5 shots. They're not assault weapons by any means. She wants to ban them. So that's what they say, and I think that's a pretty good sample size there of what they say. But let's go to what they do. I didn't find every U.S. rep to track down a U.S. rep candidate for with most of Georgia's districts are considered safe Republican, but H.R. 1808. Every Georgia Democrat in the House of Representatives voted for it, and all of them voted or co-sponsored it, but Representative Bishop. In that case, it's easier just to say who didn't co-sponsor it. But every last one of them voted for an assault weapons ban. Right there, by their actions, you know where they stand. Stacey Abrams, of course, she had sponsored HB 731, which would ban assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, and would have required weapons to be turned in or rendered inoperable. That is literally coming for your guns. Think about that for a minute. Others sponsoring it include Mary Margaret Oliver, Carolyn Hooley, Darshawn Kendrick, all who are still in the legislature in the 82nd, 136th, and 93rd districts, respectively. And you guys got a lot of districts down there. People not in the legislature anymore, but they also co-sponsored it were Pat Gardner of the 57th and D. Dawkins Hagler of the 91st. If they're running for something else now or trying to get their old job back, endorsing somebody, they also sponsored or co-sponsored a assault weapons ban. So there you have their own actions, including Stacey Abrams. I haven't seen any indication that she has changed her view. Senate Bill 344, and I think there's a House version of it. I didn't dig into that one deeply, honestly. Apologies for that. Requires training just to possess a firearm and mandates safe storage requirements. 19 of 22 Democratic senators co-sponsor this. You could more easily say who didn't co-sponsor it than who did. And that doesn't mean that the others wouldn't vote for it, but as far as who's co-sponsored it, we know that. That's licensing a constitutional right. You're not supposed to have to license your constitutional rights. Okay? So, think about that one. SB 254 gets rid of stand your ground laws, creating a duty to retreat. So, you have to ask yourself, you're out where you belong, you're okay, now you're required to retreat. It says you can't use a self-defense claim if you could have left the situation, if you could have run away. I'm not entirely certain that it doesn't include in your house, but I think it still leaves castle doctrine intact, but I'm not 100% certain. I am not an attorney, and I only read through it once, and I went back and re-looked at it a couple of times, that last part. The sponsors of that were Tanya Anderson of the 43rd, Harold Jones II of the 22nd, Kim Jackson, remember her name from Moms Demand Action endorsees? Yeah, she's a co-sponsor of that. Nan Orrick of the 36th, David Lucas of the 26th, Alina Parent of the 42nd, Nikki Merritt of the 9th, and your Attorney General candidate from the Democratic Party, Jennifer Jordan, co-sponsored a end of Stand Your Ground in Georgia. You really got to ask if that woman should be your Attorney General. And then lastly, I promised you we would get to Raphael Warnock. So Senator Warnock, as a pastor, did get political in his sermons, which, of course, Democrats have no problem with that when it's Democratic positions being espoused by a pastor. They would throw a fit if it was a Republican position. He has voiced some support for assault weapons ban, supposedly, but I didn't find anything I could link to. I don't believe. But nothing I could link to. And that's something I find very important to be able to back up my stuff. But he has co-sponsored S-736. That is essentially the Senate opposite of H.R. 1808. The prime sponsor of that is Senator Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in herself, Senator Dianne Feinstein. So, right there, by his fruits, we know him. No matter what lack of saying anything on his website, no matter the lack of saying anything on the campaign Facebook, by his fruits by his actions, we know that he is willing to co-sponsor a gun ban, a magazine ban. Okay? If he's willing to do that by his actions, you know what he's really about. So, we now have a good sampling of what they think. We don't got a party platform, but we got words and actions on the part of the candidates. and the elected officials. So, the question is, does that show a pretty good habit of they're coming for your guns? I think it does. When you're calling for it on your website, when you're sponsoring legislation against it, when you're voting for legislation against the Second Amendment, okay, maybe it doesn't quack like a duck, but it looks like a duck, and it swims like a duck. Maybe it's just a mute duck. So we have to look at that. And it looks to me like, yes, the Democratic Party in Georgia, their candidates are coming for your guns. So I might get some more of these out. Looks like I got this one in one take. It took me about one video. It took me a couple of takes because the storage on the phone was almost used up. I had to delete a bunch of stuff. But we have that. So again, like, share, subscribe, and until then, you all take care.